Welcome to my channel, WarChronicle. If you enjoy war documentaries and learning about warfare, then please hit that subscribe button. We bring you new videos every single week. Pakistan has never been short of enemies. India, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, America, Israel, and a couple of Hindu extremists on Twitter. Today we're looking at one of their more formidable enemies from 1965, India. We'll be asking the question, how did the Pakistan army defend Lahore? The Muslim-majority West would become Pakistan, and the Hindu-majority East would become India. The Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir was caught in the middle. Some believed that India had been planning this invasion for months, while others thought it was all a plot by the United States to help Israel capture the Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem. At the time, it was 475,000 strong, compared to India's 425,000. They also possessed more tanks, around 1,000 versus India's 700. But what Pakistan lacked in preparedness, they made up for in bravery and tenacity. Major General Muhammad Musa was placed in charge of defending Lahore. The Pakistanis were forced to use whatever they had, whenever they could. In some places, a handful of soldiers manned a position, often having to scavenge for weapons and ammunition. With so little resources, they managed to stall the mighty Indian army, buying precious time for the rest of the Pakistani forces to mobilize. Others say they were ordered to pull back by their superiors. The people of Chowinda didn't have 300 men, nor were they fighting against the might of the Persian Empire. But their bravery against the invading Indian army should not go unrecognized. What is certain is that the men of the 31st arrived to find an abandoned enemy camp. Many of the Indian soldiers had fled. Others had been killed or captured. It was the first time that the nation had been called upon to defend itself. It was also the first time that the people of Pakistan had defended their homeland. These two factors combined to produce an overwhelming sense of national pride and unity. As one resident of Lahore later recalled, quote, "It was the first time that Pakistan was being attacked, and we all rallied together to defend our motherland." Unfortunately, there are very few first-hand accounts of the war from the Pakistani perspective. And even fewer still tell the story of the civilians. Those who were interviewed often spoke of the confusion and chaos of those early days, how ordinary people were thrust into an extraordinary situation. Soldiers and villagers alike described the ferocity of the fighting, how it seemed that every tree and building was bristling with enemy soldiers. Everyone was an enemy. Everyone was a potential threat. Civilians were urged to flee the city, but many chose to stay, believing that the Pakistan army would be able to hold off the Indians. When questioned, the prisoners of war said they were retreating before a force 5 times their strength. For example, the village of Mangit, a village of 3,000 people who farmed the land around Lahore. When the Indians arrived, they found the fields deserted. The villagers had left their homes and taken refuge in the fields, digging deep ditches and hiding among the crops. From here they launched a series of ambushes, targeting the Indian troops and supply lines. Their tactics worked brilliantly. The Indians were unable to dislodge the villagers from their defensive positions. After suffering heavy casualties, the Indians were forced to abandon their offensive and retreat. This turned out to be an exaggeration, but it gives you an idea of the respect the Indian soldiers had for their defenders. According to the Indian military historian and veteran of the war, Lieutenant General K.M. Cariappa, quote, "The Pakistanis fought very well. They were fanatic and religious and did not care for casualties." One of the most incredible stories came from the village of Chowinda. Here, 120 villagers defended the strategically important bridge over the Sulamki Canal. They were armed with a single World War II Lewis gun, few rifles, and homemade bombs. The villagers repelled wave after wave of Indian attacks. Meanwhile, Major Jalil, the commander of the 31st Punjab Regiment, was trying to reach the village with reinforcements. The Indians realized that they were being attacked by an overwhelming force and ordered a full withdrawal. In other places, entire villages took up arms to defend their homeland. By October, the Indians had advanced as far as they would during the war, reaching within 12 miles of Lahore. This put the Indian army in a precarious position. It stretched their supply and communication lines too thin, and their momentum had completely stalled. Furthermore, the Indian public was growing tired of the war. The Indian leadership decided to end the conflict. On September, a ceasefire was declared. Fighting ended, and the two sides withdrew to their starting positions. He had only 3 weeks to get his troops ready to repel the coming Indian onslaught. They had invaded their neighbors' territory and failed to achieve even the most basic of objectives. During the war, India lost 1,800 square miles of territory. The bulk of these losses were in the Punjab and Sindh, where Pakistani forces had mounted stubborn defenses. India also suffered greater casualties: 3,700 dead, 10,000 wounded, and 246 tanks destroyed. Pakistan suffered 2,300 dead and 87 tanks destroyed. The latter theory was not entirely baseless. Earlier that year, Israel and India had signed a secret military agreement. This allowed Israeli military advisors to train Indian troops and officers at Israeli training facilities. But despite these warnings, the Pakistani government did little to prepare for the coming conflict. Both nations laid claim to the region, which was predominantly Muslim but also contained Hindu and Buddhist minorities. Since 1948, the Indian armed forces had fought against various rebel groups who sought independence from both India and Pakistan. The elite Special Service Group was deployed along the western borders, while crack regiments like the Punjab Regiment and the Sindh Regiment were fighting in the mountains of Kashmir. In the east, they crossed the working boundary, while in the center and west, they pushed through the international border. As they advanced, they captured several small towns, including Siaka and Gujranwala. To the south, Pakistani troops attempted counterattacks, but these failed due to poor coordination and inexperienced leadership. The 31st Punjab Regiment was sent to the front lines near the village of Chawinda. They were led by 26-year-old Major Akhtar Malik. His regiment was thrown into the chaos without any artillery support or air cover. Tasked with holding a bridge over the canal, the men of the 31st dug in and prepared for battle. That evening, Indian tanks rumbled toward the bridge, supported by infantry. The men of the 31st opened fire, wounding the lead tank. This gave the impression that the whole unit was engaged, when in reality, only a few men were present. Major Malik used this deception to his advantage. He led his men on a series of ambushes, wiping out entire patrols and disrupting supply columns. Over the next 3 days, his men inflicted heavy casualties on the Indians, eventually forcing them to withdraw. Most of the troops defending Lahore were made up of raw recruits and poorly trained officers, but they were determined to protect their homeland. By 1965, the Indian government had taken control of most of the region, though Pakistan continued to support militant groups based in the Kashmir Valley. They launched regular cross-border raids into the Indian state. Then in October, things escalated. A group of Pakistani commandos crossed into India and assassinated a prominent Kashmiri leader. This attack pushed India over the edge. On September, the Indian Army began a full-scale invasion of West Pakistan. Their goal was to capture Lahore and advance all the way to Karachi, forcing the Pakistani government to negotiate for Kashmir. As a result of this partition, there was mass migration and violence on an unimaginable scale. Millions fled their homes across the newly drawn borders, leading to one of the largest humanitarian crises in modern history. The two new countries were off to a bad start. Lahore is Pakistan's second-largest city, a cultural hub, and the capital of the Pakistani province of Punjab. In 1965, it was just over 1 million people. But the history of the city stretches back thousands of years. It sits just 28 miles or 45 kilometers north of the Indian border. And since time immemorial, this area has been a point of contention between two great powers. When the British departed the subcontinent in 1947, they divided it into two separate pieces. In 1965, tensions flared once again. The Pakistani leadership was shocked by the suddenness of the attack. Pakistan has a large and powerful army. Pakistan's best units were not available to defend the city. On September, the Indian Army advanced into Pakistan from 3 different directions. But the 31st was just one of many units spread thinly across the front line. There were no reserves. Although neither side achieved their objectives, India had more to be disappointed about than Pakistan. When the dust settled, the people of Lahore emerged as the heroes of the war. There are many theories as to why the Indians retreated. Some say they were simply overwhelmed by the ferocity of the Pakistani defense. For the rest of the war, the village of Chawinda became known as the Valiant of Pakistan. The 300 of Pakistan, referring to the heroic last stand of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. Over the next few decades, the residents of Chawinda would tell stories of their defense, passing down their experiences to the next generation. Pakistan's victory at Chawinda was repeated throughout the Punjab, especially around Lahore, where entire villages took up arms against the Indian invaders. The defense of Lahore was a defining moment in Pakistan's history. So we end this episode of War Chronicles with the defense of Lahore, a small but significant event in the early history of Pakistan. And on that ends yet another episode of War Chronicle.